That is brutal. Well, as the temperatures rise, many feel that the crime rates increase along the same parallel. But do they? Well, we now bring in a pair of researchers who co-authored a study on the impact of heat on crime. Paul Brandich and Scott Sheridan joining us now by way of Skype. Thanks so much, guys, for joining us. We'll start with you, Scott, though. What did your research find? Is there a relationship between the hotter temperatures and crime?
There is indeed, actually, and a lot of it, though, has to do with season. One of the interesting things is that during wintertime, of course, a lot fewer people go out and interact with each other than during the summertime. So a lot of it is actually just seasonal. But we did notice that even during the summer, you tend to see crime rates increase when temperatures get warmer, particularly during the week. On the weekend, interestingly enough, it doesn't seem to show up as much, suggesting there's a lot of people interacting regardless. But the signal is there.
Now, Paul, what kind of crime are we talking about? Are we talking about all crime rates increasing a bit, or specific crimes?
Our study, we specifically looked at aggressive crimes because the theory was that as the temperature went up, let's say, people would be more likely to become violent. So that's what we narrowed in on, and then we did the subset between aggravated assaults, domestic violence, non-aggravated assaults. We didn't get into homicide because those factors are usually completely different than related than weather, let's say.
That makes sense. Well, now, when it gets overwhelmingly hot, I know for myself, I don't want to do anything outside. So, Scott, is there a point where it gets too hot and maybe crime rates drop?
Well, it's interesting because there's actually a little bit of a difference across the research, depending on whether you see that or not. There is kind of the avoidance theory where if it gets way too hot out, that people just don't have the energy, they don't want to be social, they don't want to actually interact, and so social contact goes down. And so I know in some cities it's actually been reported that when it gets very hot, that goes down. In our study, we actually didn't find that, but in Cleveland, we're not one of the hottest cities during the summertime, and so we're not sure if it just isn't a feature in Cleveland or if it's just that Cleveland doesn't have enough really hot and humid days for that to happen.
All right, well, now, Paul, we've got just about 30 seconds now. Your research specifically there for the city of Cleveland, but do you feel that the findings would translate to other cities across the nation?
I think they generally would. Anytime you have a large agglomeration of people, like in Cleveland, we did the Cleveland proper, which was about 480,000 people at the time, the 1999 to 2004 when we did the study. I would suspect in any large city, you'd see similar results just because you have that many people around each other.
All right, good. Well, guys, really interesting stuff, no doubt about it. We appreciate it. Paul Brandich as well as Scott Sheridan giving us sort of the inside scoop on heat and crime waves. And we're actually going to continue the conversation after the break when we bring in a fellow meteorologist. Does the weather data match the stats?
Great, thanks, Alex. And a few minutes ago, Alex spoke with the authors of a study working on the relationship between crime and heat. We want to continue that conversation now by bringing in WSI senior meteorologist Dan Leonard. And Dan, this seems to be a classic case of causation versus correlation. There's a correlation for sure, but do you think the heat's actually the cause?
Is the heat the cause? That's a good one, Keith. How about an indirect cause? Is that a good enough answer? I think there's a case to be made for an indirect cause where, yeah, you have a lot more people going outside, and as you mentioned earlier, it's probably a case where it's, a lot more people interacting outside in a warm environment during the evening. But is there a direct cause? I'm not sure. I mean, that's probably a better question for a psychologist, maybe, to make people crazier. But
yeah,
there's one thing I noticed in the study that maybe can sort of clue us into this, and if you notice that the time of day, we really saw a big uptick in the summertime during the evening hours, the nighttime hours when it's really warm, but during the daytime hours there was really no difference. In fact, I think during the springtime you actually had higher incidences of violent crime during the daytime hours than during the summer. And if it was just purely a heat play, you'd see it across the board. It would just be higher crimes all throughout the day during the summer, and you really don't see that. It's just an evening thing. So that sort of leads me to believe that it's more of an indirect cause rather than a direct cause.
Right, and okay, that's fair enough, but let's go into some shaky territory here in the weather world, and something we usually tiptoe around. Causation versus correlation is something that global warming, people have a hard time with that, right? So are we in some of the same territory here? We see the numbers, we see the graph, but we can't connect them strongly enough?
How did I know you were going to bring climate change into the mix? That's a funny one. Listen, the climate's obviously changing. We're in a warmer climate than we were 150 years ago, right? I mean, obviously there's a pretty strong upward slope over the past 150 years in temperature, but I mean, I'm willing to guess that we're also on a downward trend in the past 150 years in violent crime. So, you know, a simple correlation here, you look at it and say, well, temperature goes up over the past 150 years, violent crime goes down. They're inversely correlated, but that's obviously not the case. So you got to be careful when making these sort of correlation versus causation arguments, and I think this is a classic example. So for anyone to say going forward that global warming will cause more violent crime, I would have a hard time believing that.
I was hoping to get you on camera saying that. You know, one thing that struck me about this that kind of hurt the theory a little bit was they found 77 degrees was the temperature in which crime did increase. Is 77 hot? I mean, 77 is kind of perfect, right?
77 is kind of perfect. Well, I guess it depends. What's the dew point? Because you know it's the humidity, not the heat, right?
Low dew point, 77. That wouldn't lead people to be more irritable, in my opinion.
Low dew points, yeah. Okay, I mean, that's perfect for me, but maybe not for somebody else. I don't know. I mean, you actually bring up a good point here. I mean, what if they did the study in a different city? I mean, isn't there a diminishing return at some point? You hit like 90 degrees and then people start to stay indoors, so they're not outside as much. I mean, maybe if you did the study in Phoenix or Las Vegas or something, you wouldn't have the same results, and maybe there it's the inverse. You have a nice cool night, less than 90 degrees in Phoenix, and everybody comes out and there's more violent crime. So the fact that they did the study in Cleveland, I think, is maybe a little bit of a misnomer. Maybe if you did it in a different city, you would have had different results.
All right, we have only about 30 seconds left, Dan, but another theory was that during this hotter weather, you drank more, and that led to more crime. You're in Boston right now. Don't you think you guys drank more in Boston during the winter, this winter? So those could correlate as well.
Yeah, well, obviously it was a little bit of different kind of drink, and we were all holed up. It's more like grab a bottle of wine and you have a Game of Thrones marathon or something versus, you know, the people outside in the streets and during the warm summer nights. So yeah, it's a little bit of a different thing, but the bottom line here is warmth brings the people out into the streets, and that's really what the cause is.
All right, thank you, Dan Leonard. Dan and I professionally argue on a daily basis. This is the first time on TV.